Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I used to work as a stagehand for WWE back in the early 2000s. The kind of job that doesn't get you on camera, but without guys like me, the show doesn't happen. I handled the rigging, set up the lights, made sure everything ran smoothly. I wasn't some rookie either. I knew how things worked. I knew how people moved, how shows ran, how wrestlers came and went. And that's why, to this day, I still can't explain what I saw. We were in a small town arena, the kind with peeling paint on the walls and seats that creaked when you sat down. The place had history, big fights, big moments, but it also had this strange, hollow atmosphere, like it was holding its breath. If you've worked enough venues, you know what I mean. Some places are just heavy. That night, the lineup was solid, a mix of veterans and mid-carders trying to put on a show for a die-hard crowd. One of them, Derek, let's call him that, though that wasn't his real name, was booked for the opening match. Nothing crazy, just a standard about to warm up the audience. Problem was, Derek was late, and Derek was never late. Wrestlers are a lot of things. Some are cocky, some are reckless, some don't give a damn about rules. But Derek was the kind of guy who respected the business. He never missed call time, never screwed around. If he wasn't there when he was supposed to be, something was wrong. We checked everywhere. Locker rooms, catering, parking lot. Nothing. His phone went straight to voicemail. His car wasn't in the lot. No one had seen him all day. Then, about 10 minutes before showtime, one of the referees swore he saw Derek standing in the hallway near the locker rooms. Just standing there, facing the wall. I ran over, and I swear to God, I saw him too. His back was turned to me, motionless. Something about the way he stood made my stomach twist. You ever see something that should be normal, but isn't? That's what this was. His shoulders were stiff, his head slightly tilted, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Derek, you're up, man. I called. No response. I took a step closer. The hallway suddenly felt colder, like I had walked into a freezer. My breath came out in a cloud. I could see the fine hairs on my arm stand up. Derek, nothing. I reached out, just an inch more, and blinked. And he was gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement, nothing. 1 second he was there. The next, the hallway was empty. I felt something tighten in my chest. I looked around, expecting, hoping to see him walking away, some kind of stupid prank. But the hallway was still. The door to the locker room was shut. There were no side exits. Derek was just gone. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over one of the production guys. I told him what I saw, but he just gave me a weird look and muttered something about stress. But I wasn't imagining things. I knew what I saw. By now, word was spreading that Derek was missing. Security got involved, checking every inch of the building, but they found nothing. No bags, no gear, no signs that he had ever even been there. Then the call came in. One of the producers, pale as a ghost, pulled me aside. "We found Derek," he said. Relief flooded through me until I saw his face. "He's fine," the guy continued, his voice flat. "But, he's in Chicago. Chicago, hundreds of miles away. And here's the thing. I knew for a fact that Derek had been booked for our show that night. I knew for a fact that he was supposed to be in this very arena, and I knew for a fact that I had seen him right there in that hallway just minutes ago. But the producer showed me a time-stamped security photo of Derek at an airport in Chicago. He had landed that morning. He had been nowhere near our arena. I sat down hard, my legs shaking. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know who or what stood in that hallway, motionless, facing the wall. I just know it wasn't Derek. And whatever it wasn't human. Story 2. I was the last one left. The others had packed up and gone, leaving me alone with the dim hum of the arena lights and the echoes of the night's event still lingering in the air. The place felt different when it was empty. During a show, it was alive, crowded, electric, full of sound and fury. But now, stripped of its chaos, the silence pressed in like something tangible. I liked the quiet, though. It gave me time to work at my own pace. That night, after the pay-per-view had wrapped up, I stayed behind to finish breaking down the ring. The canvas had been pulled up, the steel steps hauled away, and all that remained were the ropes and turnbuckle pads. I was crouched in one corner, working a stubborn screw loose from the pad, when I heard it. A whisper. "Help me." I froze, the wrench slipping in my grip. The voice was so soft that, for a second, I thought I had imagined it. Just the sound of my own breath, maybe, or the metal creaking under the weight of my movements. I turned my head, scanning the empty rows of seats. The arena stretched up around me, vast and yawning, seats stacked in silent rows like watchful eyes. No one was there. I shook it off and went back to work. Then I heard it again. Closer. "Help me, please." The whisper curled around me, wrapping cold fingers around the back of my neck. I swallowed hard. It was coming from the ring. I stepped back, staring down at the mat. The ring was nothing more than plywood and padding, a stage built to withstand the punishment of men throwing each other into it night after night. It couldn't make a sound, and yet it had. My pulse hammered in my ears, but curiosity, or maybe something worse, kept my feet rooted to the spot. Slowly, I crouched down and pressed my ear to the mat. At first, nothing, just silence. Then, a voice, faint, desperate. "Please help me." I yanked back so fast I nearly fell on my ass. The whisper had been right beneath me, not around me, under me. The air in the arena shifted, growing heavier. My skin prickled with cold sweat. I don't know why I did it, but I forced myself to speak. "Who are you?" I whispered. For a long moment, silence. Then, just as I was about to run, you already know, a chill ran down my spine, a deep, bone-deep kind of cold that I had never felt before. I stood there, heart thudding in my chest, every nerve in my body screaming at me to leave. And I did. I grabbed my jacket and sprinted out of that place, leaving my tools scattered across the floor. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked, engine roaring to life. But I couldn't let it go. Later that night, long after I should have been asleep, I started digging. I needed to know. The arena had hosted wrestling events for decades. Big shows, small shows, indie promotions that never made it past local crowds. I combed through old articles, searching for anything that could explain what I had heard. And then I found it. Years ago, during an indie event, a wrestler collapsed in that very ring. It was a freak accident. A move gone wrong. The match had been stopped. Paramedics had rushed in, but it was too late. He never got up. I stared at the name. It was like looking at something familiar, but not quite placing it. Then I checked the match card from that night. My stomach dropped. I knew his opponent. I had worked with his opponent, a guy I had seen just last year, still wrestling in smaller promotions, still chasing the dream. And then it hit me. I had heard that name before. Not in a headline, not in a conversation. I had heard it whispered to me from the ring. I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse hammering. I haven't been back to that arena since. And if I ever do, I won't listen. Story 3. I've been around the wrestling business long enough to hear all sorts of wild stories. Urban legends, superstitions, the kind of things that only seem to happen when the lights go down and the crowds are gone. I never put much stock in them. Not until that night. Not until I saw it for myself. It was after a SmackDown taping, late, the kind of late where even the janitors have gone home. The only people left were a handful of production guys finishing up, a couple of road agents talking about the next show, and me, just lingering, killing time, waiting for traffic outside the arena to die down. And him. He was an old-timer, one of the Attitude Era guys, a legend. I won't say his name, but if you watched wrestling back in the late 90s, you know him. The kind of guy who'd been in the business for decades. The kind who'd seen it all. Bloody matches, backstage fights, injuries that ended careers. Nothing rattled him. That night, though, he looked rattled. I noticed it when he came out of the hallway near the locker rooms. He was pale, his forehead slick with sweat, even though the arena was freezing. His hand shook. Not a lot, just enough that when he wiped his face, I saw it. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just looked past me, toward the long corridor that led to the old locker room. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like his, he said, "Something's in there." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I followed his gaze. Down the hallway, past catering, past the storage closets, was the old locker room. The one the roster hardly used anymore. Not because it was small or run down. It was just avoided. No one ever said why. At first, I thought he was messing with me. Maybe try to rib me, get a rise out of the new guy. But then I stepped closer, and I felt it too. The pressure. Not just the kind you feel in your ears when a plane lands. This was something different. The air itself was heavy, thick, like the hallway had somehow shrunk around me. The door to the locker room was closed. Not unusual, but when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't move. Locked from the inside. I knocked. No response. A second later, the old-timer grabbed my arm, yanking me back so fast I almost fell. "Don't," he said. His voice was tight, his eyes locked on the door. And then I heard it. Bang. A metal-on-metal crash from inside the room. Then another. Bang. 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 Not just one locker slamming. All of them. In rapid succession, like someone was running down the row, flinging every door open with full force. Except there was no one in there. We should have run. We should have left right then and there. But we didn't. Instead, we stood frozen, staring at that door like idiots, waiting for something else to happen. And something did. The noise stopped, replaced by silence, so deep it felt like my ears had gone underwater. I turned to the old-timer, but he was already looking at me, or past me. The hairs on my arm stood up. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to keep my eyes forward. But I did it anyway. Down the hallway, at the very end, just before the lights faded into darkness, I saw movement. A shadow. Not a person, just a shape, standing perfectly still, like it had been watching us the whole time. I blinked and it was gone. The sound of footsteps pounded toward us from the opposite direction. Security. One of the road agents had called them when they heard the noise. When the guard arrived, he didn't waste time. Pulled out his key, turned the lock, and pushed the door open. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe someone inside, laughing, pulling off some elaborate prank. But the room was empty, except for one thing. Every single locker door was standing wide open. The air inside was cold, colder than the rest of the building, and it smelled stale like dust and something else. Something rotten. I stepped inside, just far enough to see the walls, the ceiling, the far corners. Nothing. No vents open, no windows, no hidden doors. Just metal lockers, standing like open mouths, waiting. I felt something then, a pull deep in my gut, like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I had stepped into something I couldn't see, something that had been waiting for a long time. The old-timer must have felt it too, because he grabbed my arm again and yanked me back out. "Told you," he muttered. Then he walked away. They moved the locker room the next week. No one ever used that one again. And me? I never walked down that hallway alone again.